Five, four, three, two, one.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Like we say on this show, it all depends the time zone from where you are watching. Welcome to The Leader, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya and Catalid. Today's topic is all about nurturing leadership legacy. Do we have it? What does it mean? And I'm very glad that with me in studio, we're honored to have Bwana Evans Karanja. Karibu sana.
Asante sana Bwana Edmund.
We met on the lift and we're coming to this show. And you introducing yourself kindly for our viewers. Who is Evans Karanja?
Wow, thank you so much, Edmund. I'm very glad to be here on this show, and thank you for the invitation. Evans Karanja is a simple village boy who first saw the sun 36 years ago, born in the biggest hospital in Nairobi, but raised up in the village, grew up like any ordinary boy. And I would say Evans is a leader from birth, first from his mother's womb, and through scaling up just normal life, going to primary school, high school, and eventually ending up in the University of Nairobi some years ago. Yeah, and ended up in the workspace.
Now your title is Missions Director at Focus.
That's true.
What does that mean? Who is Focus?
Yeah, Focus is an acronym that stands for Fellowship of Christian Unions, which is the umbrella body that links together Christian unions in tertiary institutions. That's TVETs, colleges, and universities all across the country. And in Focus, we are working currently with about 215 Christian unions in these institutions, with a population of about 64,400 students who are members of these CUs that we work with. And we've been in existence for the last 50 years.
Yes, you just did the 50th anniversary the other day.
Sure, yeah. We are 50 years this year, since 1973 when we were first established. Yeah, but Focus is also affiliated to Evangelical Alliance of Kenya, who are part of this show, as well as NCCK, and also we are linked together globally to other Christian unions through the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students.
Wonderful. Now, let's look at the national leadership landscape in Kenya. Would you have any comment on it? It's a broad, open-ended question, but I'd be curious how you respond to that.
Kenya, my land. Of course, I do have a lot of opinions about the national leadership in this country. I grew up through President Moi's era. That's when I was born and grew up through, and I've seen the transitions from Moi to Kibaki, all through to President Uhuru, and now currently to President Ruto. And so just looking at the changes in this country and how leadership has been portrayed, I see both opportunities and I see challenges that have been posed and that are shaping who leaders are in this country. First of all is to appreciate that we have a very beautiful country. We have very good governance structures. But also we have kind of earned ourselves a bad title about a tainted kind of leadership, because our leadership being more elective poses some challenges in itself, that it's only the person who is well managed and the person with the greatest influence that ends up in those positions, but not necessarily that they actually are good leaders at the end of the day. And so when you look at the kind of challenges that the country is going through, they inform the kind of leadership we have. Because when you have egocentric leaders, people that are selfish and people that are just looking out for their own interests, then everybody, the majority, end up losing. Yet the few that are up there, they end up benefiting. And so that has created a lot of inequalities in the country. And so you find resources are centralized around some places, and other areas are lacking. And also when it comes to problem solving, is that some places are overwhelmed by economic challenges, by social challenges, yet some places they are also greatly benefiting. And so I feel that the leadership in Kenya, there needs to be a bit of change for us to be able to counter all these challenges that are there. And the opportunity lies in actually bringing leaders that actually would think about the entire nation as opposed to themselves, leaders that actually fear God. Because I believe when people believe in God and follow God and look at the example that was set by our Lord Jesus Christ, then there will be fair leaders. There will be people that are going to bring, changes and have everybody on board. Yeah.
Now, these leaders are not from outside. They're from within. It's you and me.
Yes.
And granted, for the elected leaders that we have, one would argue that we don't necessarily get the leaders we deserve, but we get the leaders that we don't get the leaders we desire, but leaders we deserve. Because even when you opt not to participate, you basically have elected to accept whatever leadership that you get. So to that extent, it's incumbent upon the citizenry to get involved, not to be distant from the process.
I do agree with you, Edmund, that the leaders we have, we create them ourselves. We are the ones that, champion their agenda. We are the ones that cheer them up when they come through our estates and our villages. We are the ones that decide to elect them or not elect them. And it's sad to see that sometimes we base our election of leaders on our ethnicities or on the populace in terms of what's the most popular party, who is shouting loudest, and all that. And it's also sad even from being a Christian, from the Christian fraternity, that we are also not as objective. We are just like all other Kenyans and just going with the flow. What's trending? Who is there? And the common question that everyone asks: who are we choosing this year? Who are we electing this year? And so even if there are good candidates out there, and also the other cliche that there is in the society is that I don't want to lose my vote by choosing the less popular candidate. Yet that less popular candidate could be the best person or the best placed leader who can actually bring change into this country. And so I believe I actually agree with you in your statement that we get the leaders that we decide. And also some of the people that actually get to a voter apathy and they say, we are not going to vote. Simply because it doesn't make a difference. So we end up getting not the so good leaders simply because more than half of the electorate decided to stay home on the election day. And I feel a turnaround, if we get to a turnaround place, is actually where, everybody rises up and says, I will participate. And participation is not just limited to voting. All these positions for, the election managers are being advertised. How many Christians are willing to actually rise up and participate as election managers, as clerks, as POs, as DPOs, even in the highest offices? And because I believe, as the old adage says that politics is a dirty game. But I think the game is as dirty as its players. So if you have to turn around, then you have to get the clean players in. You have to get the clean managers in. And so that the whole process is credible and we have the right people and we do not have all these malpractices that has been there throughout the time.
Now let's look at legacy-centric leadership. Unpack that for a 2-year-old.
I think it begins from the point of what is legacy really? And legacy, I think it's what you would want to be remembered for after you have exited the scene. And many people start thinking about legacy at the end of their term, when you have been working as a CEO of a company or you have been a leader of an institution or an organization. And when you're just about to retire, that's the point where you're asking yourself, what is it that I need to do for me to be remembered? We see some people, putting up plaques with their names on buildings, on churches, on schools, on roads, because they want to be remembered in some sort of a way on a plaque. But also you also realize others would actually do radical changes in those organizations. And so for me, legacy is about, bringing a positive change that actually outlives you. That influence that actually will bring a change, a positive change in the society and the lives of people way after you have gone and exited that scene. But for you to prepare for that legacy, as we are talking about legacy-centric leadership, it doesn't start at the end of your leadership. It has to be with you all along as you serve, from the point where you get into leadership throughout your service in that leadership to the very end, so that people get to know you as a leader who brings, transformation, as a leader who is of good character, as a leader who actually does everything for the good of the people and for what we call the greater good of the society. And for me, legacy-centric leadership is actually leading with the end in mind. What is it that you'd want to leave? What difference would you want to make in the society? What difference would you make in the lives of people, so that many years after you have left, that people will still talk about you?
Indeed, it's relational.
Yeah.
And if I'm getting to hear you, it's not at the end, but it's while you're actually journeying and how you're relating and impacting others as you lead.
Sure. It's that twofold. It's a two-pronged way, where I always say the legacy of a leader is based on their character. And you see, character is who you are when people can't see you. What are these values that you have in your life that actually dictate the way you do things that you do? Because with those kind of values, you also ask yourself, am I just here to maintain what I found, or am I here to actually bring some value, or what we call value addition, into the organization or the institution you're leading, or even a nation, if we have to go to the highest level of leadership. And so as you think about impact, how would you define impact? And for me, impact is actually, what is it? What is the quality of life that you leave behind? The life of the organization you're leading, the life of the people you are leading, and also what impact that organization you're leading has in the general society. How would people feel? Would they feel that this society is making a difference in our society, or it's actually becoming a hindrance or an impediment to the development of this society? And so for me, I see the leader in terms of character, defining that legacy, but also in terms of what they would define as an impact that actually would outlive them.
Let's look at the youth. I mean, every 9-10 years or so, census is undertaken. Kenya, by and large, is largely a youthful nation,
Sure.
as is Africa. Are the youth ready for leadership?
I would say yes, and a big yes. I work in the youth space myself, and I believe in the youth. When I was growing up, our teachers in school used to tell us we are the leaders of tomorrow. And then they would tell us tomorrow never comes. You see the paradox.
Yes.
Of telling us about that. Recently, there is actually earlier this year in April, there is a report that was released, a banner report that had a few organizations coming on board. And one of the things they discovered is that in Africa, the median age is 19 years.
Yeah.
But the median age for our leaders is 63 years. Paradox again. For me, I believe the youth are not the leaders of tomorrow. We are actually the leaders of today. Because being the majority in the society, that means that everywhere you go, you will find somebody who is below 35 years of age taking a leadership position, whether it's a supervision, middle level management, even junior level, but it's still leadership. And so for me, I believe that the youth of this nation are ready, and the youth of Africa, and generally the world, they are ready for leadership. And they have ideas, they are sharp, they have the energy to drive the agenda.
Do you give them opportunities? And here, let's just speak truth to power, and even where we are at.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you're in the faith space.
Yes.
When you look at the church, do we find youth in leadership in church?
Wow, nice question. I would say yes.
The pros and cons. It doesn't mean that now the older folk step out, get off. It's a continuum.
Yeah. One African writer, once said that whatever an old man can see well seated. A young man cannot see cannot see it when they are standing on top of the tallest tree in the village, you know. But I think there is some truth to that, but also it's a bit of an undermining statement to the youthful generation. For me, I think the youth are actually ready for that space. Are they given opportunities? I think yes, they have opportunities in the faith space. Let me talk about even what we do in Focus, for example. Is that our youth are empowered to lead the Christian unions that we have. The staff who are the secretariat actually give them support, they train them, and also, you know, mentor them all through the process. But they're the ones that take the forefront in terms of making programs, you know, and leading, you know, those programs throughout their tenure. When we come to the church, most of the churches currently, they usually have, you know, youth programs. And in those youth programs, the people that are leading are actually the youth, right from teenage. When you look at our school system, for example, is that we began kind of an election process to get the, you know, the leaders, you know, with all these president, deputy president, the secretaries. And I think for me, that is giving the youth the space that they need so that we start shaping them right from when they are kids. By the time they get to the youthful age and get to, you know, young adulthood, where now they get into the marketplace, they are already, you know, empowered. And so I feel that our space in Kenya, that the youth have largely gotten an opportunity to provide leadership.
What are some of these innovative approaches that could be employed in youth ministries to help draw them out and empower them?
I would say currently we have a generation, we are moving from Generation Z towards Generation Alpha. And they are very specific in terms of their traits. These people are empowered in terms of they have knowledge. Actually, nowadays I say they have information overload because they of knowledge beyond what some of us when we were growing up had. They are more global in terms of their thinking and in terms of their engagements. And so for me, when I look at this generation, Edmund, I see a lot of hope in the youth themselves and in terms of bringing change. But with all this information overload, it's also they are lacking in some bits of skills. And those skills are actually supposed to be imparted. I find impartation happening in two major ways. Number one is through capacity building, and majorly that is through training, where we have to expose them continuously to training, and especially training on leadership. How do you move people? How do you move people from point A to point B? How do you bring change in a society, for example, and teaching them on change management, teaching them on aspects of how do you monitor progress, how do you monitor success, you know, monitoring evaluation and such, and just giving them the best possible training as much as it is possible, be it, you know, a virtual training, physical training, you know, global level, you know, specific level at maybe their capacities, either they are leading, you know, a church group or they're in school. But the underscore thing is that they need training so that they can be able to shape the knowledge they have, all this information overload, develop it into skills and start, you know, bringing solutions to existing problems and challenges.
And yes, and indeed, in the digital age that we're in, the world is a village. And like you say, the danger is information overload. How do you help discern? Because there's plenty of information out there and you could go down the wrong path.
And that brings me to my second point, mentorship. Yeah. So after you have, you know, trained them and you help them to actually understand this is, you know, the cup of leadership and this is what it entails. For me, the second bit is actually mentoring these young people, walking with them through the path. And this is where the role of those that are older come in, because we are talking about legacy today. And I said legacy is about what will you be remembered for. One of the ways of actually preserving your legacy is preserving it in human beings. you'll be remembered more if you can replicate yourself in others. And that replication only happens through mentorship. When this person who has a lot of information has gone through training, then they need somebody to hold their hand, literally, and walk the journey with them. Because that's the point where you see how is the emotional intelligence, how do they deal with people? And then you tell them, you don't speak to people like this. You don't handle people like this. This is the way to do it. Those places where they are lacking in terms of, say, strategic management, for example, you are able to bring them and show them this is how you craft strategies. This is how you go through implementation. This is how you develop KPIs, for example, the key performance indices, and this is how you evaluate that. And when you hold their hand and walk with them, then you're actually going to make them better leaders. Because there is nothing as good as having somebody who has information, and then they have the right skill sets, and then they are able to translate those skill sets into actual actions that are bringing an impact. And for me, that is the place of mentorship.
And indeed, that's really helping navigate the faith journey. And in this journey of faith, we find that it's not necessarily always smooth. What are some of these crises that one would find in that journey of faith?
Wow. Faith is a very dynamic category area, for lack of a better word. When we talk about faith-guided leadership, for example, it's where we're trying to look at God and what He would expect of us. One of my beliefs is that it's actually God who calls leaders and places them in places of influence. And when we look at Scripture, we see this right from the beginning, that God identifies people. Right from Adam, He identified Adam to be the father of the human race, and come to Abraham, getting to Moses, sending him out. Talk about people like David, who He actually appointed directly to actually take leadership. All the kings we find there, we see Jesus Christ coming on earth and identifying, 12 people that He actually pours Himself into and uses them to bring change, to create the church. And for me, that being our beginning, there are expectations that God has bestowed upon us. And it's actually to exemplify who He is in the society, is to point people towards Him, even as we do our day-to-day activities. When you come to the world is not very pleased with God. Mm-hmm. And if you're getting into a place where one that you follow is not accepted, then they treat you the same way they would treat Him. And I feel one of the hardest things for us who are believers and getting into positions of leadership is getting into a society that is already corrupted. Corrupted by sin in every way of manifestation. Because the world will bribe. The world will bribe its way to get influence. The world will steal to build power. The world, will subject people to slavery just for them to make a statement. The world, will do all this manner of things that actually do not bring unity, that do not bring harmony. It's about selfishness and people. And when you are a Christian and you have to come into that world and you're trying to bring the change in this culture, then you're bombarded by all this opposition, then it's not an easy place to actually discharge your duties. We live in a country where people will be killed for being good. People will be jailed for being right. Unfortunately, you see that even where people will be arrested, and because you can't give a bribe, probably you are not even, because you're not even have committed any crime, but you'll be jailed simply because you said, I will go through the system, and the system itself is not fair. So as you live as a Christian, being a righteous person in an holy society is the biggest challenge that we have to face. And being a leader actually is even a bigger challenge, because you're actually going against the grain. And that means you have to go beyond, one step beyond just a regular leader who doesn't care about the society, and they will be willing or more than willing to follow what the society demands or wants or has been cultured to. And so as a faith-based leader, we have to always remember that we have a master, that we would rather be unpopular. We would rather do things to please our God. You know the way Paul would tell Timothy, as a good soldier, that your main aim is to please your commanding officer, as it is. And so you do not, engage a lot in civilian affairs. But that is easier said than done. Because when you find yourself on that platform, then you realize it is not, as we say, a cup of tea.
There was this quote that I read, actually, that was shared, that was doing rounds, that it's dangerous to be right when the government is wrong.
Sure.
You're on your own.
Yeah, you're on your own. It's a small island, and that island can, it can drown any time because if the government is the ocean,
But now let's look at this whole aspect of mentorship, leadership in the different spaces, at the family level, at the workplace, in church, in the nation, and beyond.
Wow. I would say mentorship is very dynamic. It can be formal, it can be informal. And for me, family is the beginning point. Part of my life story is that I always say my greatest mentor in life is my father. Because right from when I was young, my father gave me responsibilities to do. And he would show me how to do it. And to date, I actually ascribe part of the man I am to my upbringing and for that, kind mentorship that my father actually instilled in me. Then I went to school and I found my teachers. And they are teachers who would actually see things I couldn't see in myself. My academic prowess, some of the talents I had, and my leadership capability to be actually true, that I started getting leadership, responsibilities when I was school. But I used to be a timid boy, very shy and all that. But they tell me, you can actually do this. And they would push me and they would encourage me. Going to church, finding my youth pastors and my pastors there, the elders in the church, and you given a responsibility and, provide that guidance. What I want to say is that mentorship can happen anywhere and it begins from home. And so for the parents watching, there is something we call informal mentorship where your kids are just looking at you and they are learning from you. And you realize with a matter of time, the way you talk, the way you do things, your kids will tend to actually do things the same way. They will tend to talk the same way as you do. And so we need to be careful as parents, wherever we are, that what are kind of values that we are bringing to our kids? What is it that we are instilling? Because instilling something in a kid is actually meaning the entire race that comes after you will actually, carry that kind of character. And that will be your legacy, at the end of the day. And so for me, it's that mentorship will happen anywhere, in school, in church, at workplaces. And mentorship doesn't have, an end, I would say, because there is always somebody in our lives that is more experienced than us. There's somebody who knows something that we don't know. There's somebody who saw the sun before we did. And I feel it's, in as much as, there are people that are in higher positions, and this I got even listening to, some people I admire who are up there in international positions in some of the big organizations in the world. And they will tell you, where I serve, I have 3 mentors. I always look at the example of even having the president of Harvard University, the best university in the world, has about 3 advisors. And that tells you that nobody can say that I don't, need mentorship. I don't need guidance, because everyone, has always some people in their lives who know more, who are better than them, and they can learn from them. And so that bit continues. But the second bit of mentorship is what we call the formal mentorship, is where somebody has to learn something from somebody who is experienced in that area. Now, formal mentorship can be in the area of career, for example, where you're getting in a certain professional line, and there are people in that line that actually have been there, they're experienced, and they can work with you. And that kind of formal mentorship is where the mentor and the mentee, they get into a kind of a collaboration, an agreement of some sort of what is it that the mentee would want to learn, and how will they go about it. And you can come up with a plan, and that is something that most of us can do, because there's always people behind us, whether you are mentoring a small kid or a youth or peers. who are coming into the space that you're in, that you know you're good at this thing. And so that is also another form of mentorship. And that can happen, at church level, school level, at the general society level as well.
Who would you encourage to have seeking out the other? Is it always just the mentor who looks intentionally for the mentee? Mm-hmm. But the mentee can also be bold enough and encouraged to also look for mentors and ask, can I learn from you? I want to be at your feet. Show me, guide me. Mm.
There is a small proverb from my community that says, whoever needs help is the one who seeks after it.
Yes.
And for me, I believe the greatest beneficiary in a mentor-mentee relationship is the mentee. And they need to be proactive in looking out for opportunities to be mentored. Part of it is actually, passing on a request to people that they feel they would want to be where they are, and considering that. And of course, there are people that would also, of course, at that point ask, can you be mentored by somebody you don't have, a relationship with socially? Can you be mentored by somebody virtually? And I think all those opportunities, because mentorship is about learning and becoming like, or even better like, someone who is ahead of you in where you would want to go. And so in terms of how that happens, you are unlimited. You can do it physically, you can do it virtually, and so on and so forth. And so for me, I feel the primary person who should actually reach out should be the mentee reaching out to a mentor. But that doesn't also mean that the mentors or somebody who feels I would want to mentor people cannot actually reach out. Because some of the young people, and I would say that they don't know that they need mentorship. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you have to actually create that platform for them and avail yourself and tell them, I am here for you and I can actually do this. And this is to challenge people that you can actually, volunteer your time. You are experienced, you have the knowledge, you have gone through life. And there are two things you can do about examples with people. You can either have an example to follow or an example not to follow. Some of us have made mistakes in life, yes. And I don't want to see others making that kind of mistake. Some of us have excelled in some areas, and we do want people to also excel, learning from what I do. And so I would challenge people out there that you experience in some sort of a way. Look for one or two people in your workplace, in your church, or even come to places like Focus, where we have so many students, we don't have a lot of, staff, and just come and say, I would want to work with 2 or 3 students in this area. It can be a spiritual area, it can be a social area, it can be, a professional area, and just volunteer and invite some people. Now, there are people that also have, some organizations, say organizations that are basically dealing with the youth, for example. And those organizations, they have many programs. Would you also want to, put a mentorship program as part of, if you're doing, some CSR activities as a corporate organization? Could you, as you do those corporate, social responsibility activities, could you also create a platform where as you get to these societies that you can have a mentorship plan? I love some of the organizations, some banks and all that actually have very robust mentorship programs that would, bring up leaders from among those young people, so that as you give a student a scholarship, it's not just about taking them to school. It's asking yourself what else can you contribute, so that as you give a scholarship to a student, can you also create a forum where during their long holidays, you can take them through, a mentorship forum, a mentorship conference, a mentorship summit, something like that, or just provide, mentors from within your organization or your society that can actually work with them throughout their period to shape them into the leaders that you'd want and to bring that change that your organization seeks to bring. So for me, it's two-way.
Indeed. And let's look at now the place of discipleship vis-a-vis mentorship as an actualization of the Great Commission. And where you sit at Focus, I think you're right in the center of it.
That's very true. Actually, one of my favorite Bible verses is in Matthew chapter 9, from verse 35 to the end there. And it says, when Jesus Christ had been preaching in every village and every city, he looked back at some point and he saw these multitudes of people following him. And there's an observation he made. He said they were looking like sheep without a shepherd. They were harassed. And Jesus Christ was moved with a lot of compassion. And he turned to his disciples who were with him, and he told them, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest that he may send the harvesters into his harvest field. And we see in chapter 10, verse 1, Jesus calling his disciples to himself and then commissioning them to actually go out to the lost sheep of Israel. And of course to share the message of the kingdom of God, heal the sick, and do all that demonstration of the gospel by touching the lives and the needs of the people they were going to. I see Jesus Christ, who is our Lord, as a model of a perfect mentor, who is first calling the disciples to himself and then pointing them to what they need to do out there, because the people out there, they are craving for help, they are craving for salvation, they are craving to have a better life, and that life is found in God alone. And so Jesus Christ models how mentorship should be. For 30 years, he is on his own, grows up, gets to a point, and starts his ministry. And for 3.5 years, he is with these 12 people who he pours his life to, completely showing them every day, how do you deal with 5,000 people who are hungry? Mm-hmm. How do you deal with people that have leprosy? How do you deal with demon-possessed people? How do you deal when it comes to government and paying taxes? He's modeling all this and actually showing a different way of doing things than the religious way of doing things. And for me, I find discipleship and understanding our faith and what God has called us to being very pivotal in terms of, building a long-lasting legacy, and especially through mentorship and through preaching of the gospel and bringing light into the, into this one dark world. Because when we have been transformed by the gospel ourselves, then Jesus Christ makes this appeal in Matthew 5 by saying, you are the light of the world. You are the salt of the earth. Mm-hmm. And he says, the moment you are lit, you are like that lamp that needs to be, on a lampstand.
You can't keep it hidden.
You can't keep it hidden. Right. Yeah, you have to provide light to everyone. Because we know the right way as Christians, we know what God would expect of us. Then we need to go forth and bring that into the society. So growing up in God, seeking Him, living our lives according to His word, this is the whole journey of discipleship. Again, discipleship is like mentorship. It has no end. Mm-hmm. We all keep growing. I remember one bishop once saying that even bishops, they need to continue in the discipleship journey until Christ tarries and comes back. Because every morning we wake up, we find new challenges. Every morning we wake up, we have to call upon the name of the Lord in prayer. Everywhere we go, we have to help the world see. The way Jesus ends that Matthew 5:16 by saying, let your deeds shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. And Peter repeats the same in 1 Peter 2:12 by saying, you live your good lives among the pagans, so that they may see your good deeds, that even if they were to accuse you of anything, they might see those good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. And for me, I feel discipleship is a journey that every Christian needs to commit themselves to. And as we commit ourselves to that journey, and God gives us places of influence, and those are places of leadership, that we are going to transmit the kingdom values in the society. We are going to transmit those kingdom values. As I sit as a banker, for example, in a bank, as I serve people, am I transmitting the values of the kingdom to the customers, to my colleagues, as a farmer somewhere on a farm? Would people see God in me? Would they see Jesus in me? As I talk to people, are my words full of grace? Am I the one who is discouraging people or encouraging them? Am I showing mercy? Am I being kind when people are going through problems, in the society? Because I think there's a cliche that says that people will not care how much you love until they see how much you care. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that the whole thing is, we have to demonstrate our Christian aspects, our Christian character by the deeds, whether in our professional spaces, whether at home, whether in church or elsewhere. And that for me is the journey. And if there is one thing that we need to be remembered for, is that we were Christians. The way we would sing, the Amazing Grace song by John Newton, we still remember him because, he committed his life to being a Christian. You know, the way we remember people like William Wilberforce by their acts of abolishing slavery in a very clever way because they were Christians. You know, that's the push. So for me, our following Jesus should push us to do good things for others. It should push us that when our day comes and we are buried, that people would say, surely that man or that woman was a Christian.
Being intentional in discipleship, we live in a fallen world. The evil one is very much present and will always work at countering your intentionality. How do you remain strong and committed to the faith and remain, you know, a Christian? Who do you turn to? How do you not give up? And if even those who are our mentors in this journey, they're also human. Some may fall, may slip, and unfortunately mislead. How do you discern?
I would say turn to the Lord. Turn to God anytime, every time. Turn to the Lord. I think we are more powerful if we can move on our knees. We are more powerful in this world and more influential if we can move on our knees. Because our main stronghold, as the psalmist would say, you know, the Lord is a strong tower where everyone runs to, they find refuge there. And for me, when the world is battering you, and Paul would write in one of his epistles, he says, we are not like the jars of clay, you know, because those ones are shattered when they are pushed on every side. That when that happens, we are also not dismayed, we are not discouraged, you know, we are not broken because we have a firm foundation in our Lord, Jesus Christ, and we can turn to them. But secondly, is that brings the aspect of true fellowship. Because one of the things that our society is creating, unfortunately, is actually a continuous busyness that is pulling us apart from each other. And because we are talking even about the youth that are born with a phone on their hand, is that they have turned to social media as part of their social life. So somebody has 1,000 friends, but no friend at all. Because those friends, they only interact with the content they find on social media. And true fellowship is actually declining because people just come to church. They sit down, listen to a sermon, sing, pray, and unless the preacher says, greet your neighbor or say this to your neighbor, we don't even know each other. So we just sit with strangers every Sunday or midweek fellowships and then go home. And for me, I feel that the place of fellowship could strengthen our walk in this evil world. Because when you look at the early church, in the book of Acts, when it opens up and talks about how the church was, they did everything together. In Acts chapter 2, they shared in bread, they helped each other in terms of their needs, and the Lord added to their number. You know, they were breaking bread together, they were fellowshipping together, praying together, sharing their needs. And of course, it's recorded that they would even sell their property and help each other. So their needs were taken care of. Do we see the same thing today, Edmund, in the Christian fraternity? People are sleeping hungry in the same congregation and nobody is aware. You know, people are, and you see, when somebody doesn't have basic needs, food, shelter, and all that, the temptations to get into evil are very, very high.
Very vulnerable.
Yeah, people will be pushed to steal. People will be pushed to kill. People will be pushed to all these, you know, bad things. What if we created a Christian community within our fellowships that would be very much, you know, engaged in each other, people's lives, that will help people to get out of this, not to be corrupted by the evil environment around them, but they will actually help them continue focusing on the faith journey. And so for me, when you turn to God, also turn to the people. Let's create fellowships. Because therein we, and I think the whole issue of accountability, and it's one of the things we do in Focus and actually help our CEOs do, create small group accountability structures, you know, those midweek fellowships, Bible study groups, you know, and all such meetings. Get to know who are your churchmates who go to the same church within your, you know, estate or within your neighborhood, And could you hold each other accountable? Could those be people that you can actually call to when you know you are down and you need an encouragement, or you need a prayer, or you are lacking in anything, and you can come and genuinely say, I need help, and that community can actually be there for you. I think the heaven journey is better walked together, not alone.
Not alone.
Yes.
And indeed, as we now start bringing this discussion to a close in just a couple of minutes, is then let's briefly talk about building that faith legacy, so that then really we are in this fallen world. It's not about us; it's about the Lord Jesus Christ, but with a kingdom focus beyond us here. How then would you advise or give some tips, and especially to the younger generation?
Yeah. The book of Revelation, the last chapter, talks about Jesus Christ coming back. And when he comes back, he records this, that my reward is with me, and I'm going to reward everyone according to what they did. I think it calls us to a life where we need to be careful about what we do and about how we engage, because everything that we do will be brought into account. And for everything we do, there is always a reward for it. Whether that reward is a punishment or it's a commendation, that is up to us, and asking ourselves, how did we live our life? So I think the first thing we need to know is going back to the basics, is going back to where it matters most. Asking ourselves the question, we are in Christ, or are we in Christ in the first place? And if we are in Christ, are we living our life the way Christ would want us to live our life? And how do we know that? How are our deeds? How are our thoughts? How our everyday life? Could somebody look at us and say, this person is actually a Christian? Not by name, but because they can see Christ in us. The same thing that they saw in Peter and John. The Sanhedrin actually looked at them and said, when you look at these guys who are unschooled and ordinary, they must have been with Jesus because of the way they are. Could somebody say that about us? And for me, that's where it begins. Are our lives shaped by Jesus Christ? Secondly, is where God has entrusted us to be. Whether you are a student out there, whether you are working or looking for a work or running a business, are you bringing this character onto your everyday life? Do your fellow students in class, or pupils for those that are in lower schools, institutions, the students up there, can they say that you're a Christian? Are you a Christian student? Are you a Christian businessman? What do your customers say about you? What do your supervisors at work say about you? You may be in ministry as well, like I am. How are you discharging your duties in that ministry? Are you exemplifying Christ? Are you doing things the way? Are you passing on that love of Christ to others? Because for me, that, when your customers say, we want to go to this shop, what is it that brings them? That's the legacy we are talking about. When your boss say, I can only trust this person, that's the legacy. And may that, that kind of trust that our customers, our supervisors, our colleagues have on us be based that we actually showing the character of Jesus. The way Jesus was followed by even thieves and everyone else. Multitudes were following him because he was doing good wherever he was going. And for me, if we are to leave a legacy like him, then we have to do good the way he used to do good. And for me, if there are any tips, for me, those are two. Live for Jesus and show Jesus to others.
And indeed, it includes and goes beyond the temptation of having the tangible legacy on this earth.
Yeah.
Brick and mortar.
Sure. Yeah. You don't need a plaque with your name on a building or the name of a school to be remembered. I remember the story in a short way of Alexander the Great. In his last conquest, he went to a military battle, he contracted a disease, and he realized he's not going to make it home. And so he called his most trusted generals to be around him on his deathbed. And he told them, I have 3 requests that I want you to fulfill when I die. And one of them is, let my physician push the casket alone. Then take all my gold from the stores and everything I own as treasure, pour it on the road, and let people trample on it towards my grave. And then have my hands be, outside my casket. And then the generals, of course, asked, why should we do this? And then he said, let people know that even if you are very influential and powerful, that a physician will not give you life at the point of death. But secondly, is that these treasures you see, they can never buy life. They will not do anything for you when you die. And lastly, my hands outside the casket would mean I brought nothing to this world.
I take nothing.
And I take nothing out of it. And so we don't need our names up there. But if we can invest in people, we can pour our lives in people, we can actually live a long life following Jesus and pointing people towards Jesus and actually making a difference wherever we are by bringing Christian values, then let us be remembered for such.
Indeed.
Yeah.
That's where we're going to end today's show. It's all about Jesus as we nurture leadership legacy. Thank you very much, Evans, for your insightful talk.
Thank you so much, Edman. It was a pleasure being here.
And like we say, let's do this next time. Thank you for the privilege of your company. This has been The Leader, courtesy of the Evangelical Alliance of Kenya and Castle Lead. I'm Edmund Mudibo. God bless.